Okay, next item, please.
Discussion items. First one is the hiring process. Ms. Mason.
Good evening. It was requested at one of the previous board meetings to have a presentation and review the hiring process that we use for our administrators and our directors. Our committee met in June, and we'll be meeting again in August prior to the August board meeting. And so our plan is to present the hiring process together as a committee at the August board meeting, but I did want to just give you a brief update. You'll see on the screen is our current process that we use for hiring administrators. We have an applicant screening committee, which is usually the executive directors and HR staff. And then after the applicants are selected, we have an administrative interview committee, which includes cabinet members, so directors, and also ADSA. The administrator union has representatives on that interview committee as well. And then they interview all the applicants that were selected for an interview. So, for example, we have on Thursday we have assistant principal interviews coming up, and that's with the administrative committee. We'll be interviewing. It's going to be a long day. We're going to be interviewing 15 candidates, and that's directors and ADSA members on that committee. Through that process, we narrow it down. Typically, 4 candidates. We do our best to make sure that buildings have 4 candidates to go to the second round, which includes the parent and community committee. So that's parents or community members that are interested in participating. And then there's also a staff committee, which includes DFT, the teachers union, also the non-instructional union and the engineer union. They're always invited to have representatives on those committees as well. That's the second round. And at the high school level, so we have a vacancy right now as for the assistant principal at Dearborn High, and so for their second round, they'll also have a student committee. So they have parents and parents community, one group, then they'll have staff, and then they'll have students. That's for the high school level only. We don't have students on the middle school or the elementary level. And then the final round is, so then everyone gets ranked, ranks all the candidates. That's an independent and private process. You don't have to share or anything like that. And at a prior meeting, it was recommended that we don't have names on those ranking sheets, so that's since been removed at that time. And then the final round is the superintendent and the executive director has the final round with 2 or 3 candidates that rank the highest. So that's our current process. And that's the link on here is it links to the HR blog where that process has been published for years. The history is that between 2000 and 2010, it was just one committee with a few administrators, one DFT representative, and the superintendent would make the final decision. And then at 2010, that's when it changed and it moved to, that's when Dr. Maleko was in this current position, Executive Director of Staff and Student Services. And that's when it moved to multiple committees and stakeholders, the process that we currently use now. And I think it's important to share that in the past, which we've talked about here at other meetings, that it was oftentimes that committee members, when they served on the committee, they felt that the person they wanted to get the position, if they didn't get it, they felt they were upset about it. And so we added a disclaimer, which was a recommendation at the time from Trustee Petzelkoff, that explains that this is a process and that everybody who's participating is part of that process, and that all that feedback goes to, so the ranking sheets and the overall ranking sheet that has the formulas in it, and then also the comment sheets, all that goes to Dr. Maleko, goes to the superintendent, and that it's ultimately the superintendent's decision to make a recommendation to the board. And that's why we added that disclaimer for that purpose, so that we were clear in the intent and the purpose of the committees. These are a few examples, not all examples. I did send a survey out to the Tri-County area to find out what other districts are doing, and you'll see they're very similar to what we do. Some of them only have 2 rounds. Some of them have 3 rounds similar to what we do. Sometimes the people, like an example too, the staff that works the closest with whatever position's being filled, those are the people who sit on the interview committee. You'll see like in example 3, 2 teachers, there's the application screening committee, 2 teachers, 1 secretary, the PTO president, central office staff, several principals, 1 board member. It really varies from district to district. There was a few districts that are very similar to our process. 1 district I contacted to find out more because it said that the first round was 3 teams. I said, who's on the 3 teams? They said, well, it changes depending on the position. So it changes who's going to sit on those 3 teams depends on whatever position's being filled. And then you'll see in example 1, it's 1 committee, 1 administrative interview, and then the superintendent and central office representative. Other examples are here. HR and executive director, they conduct a stakeholder feedback session to find out what everyone's looking for, what qualities and characteristics they're looking for the person and that they're going to hire for whatever vacant position they have. And then from there they move on to the screening applicant process, central office, building staff. This one's a little bit longer than the other ones. And so, as I said in the beginning, I'll join the committee again. We'll be meeting in August again. We actually do have one of our newest hires from out of the district on that committee on purpose because he's got experience in another district, and so we thought his perspective on how that process went is clear in his mind. And so that's Mike Wager. We have Zaina Jabril on there, Executive Director Fatmi Faraj. And so we have a handful of people. There's a few others. And so really, we'd love to have your feedback and your suggestions about things that you'd like us to look at or things you'd like us to change or any ideas that you have. And if you have ideas now, feel free to share. And if you want to contact me at a later time, that's always welcome, of course.
Trustee Thorpe?
You mentioned on the one slide before this, one of the examples that they used was getting stakeholders together to see what desirable qualities that you'd look at. Do we do that at this point? I don't recall doing that.
No, we don't. We get stakeholder input through the interview committees, but we don't get together a whole stakeholder group. And
So we don't do it beforehand. We do
Right.
it once we're into the interview
Yeah.
process.
So like when you're in the interview process and you're on one of the committees, the first half hour is spent reviewing the questions and changing the questions. So you're given a set of questions just to start with, but each committee changes those questions based on what they're looking for in that person. For example. So the
Thanks.
way that this was described sounds like a superintendent search.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
When the board has the
Yeah.
stakeholder input prior to screening the applicants.
Trustee Barry?
We can go back 1 slide to examples. If you still have your notes, I'd like to see which districts are aligned with which examples.
Absolutely.
And see how comparable they
Yeah.
are to us. And if you don't have to go back to that slide, the system we used to use before, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure.
Before?
Dr. Maleko might
Yeah,
elaborate.
I
better
could
than I.
probably,
Yes,
because I probably, the history of it, basically, when I got hired as assistant principal, and I'll just tell you how the pendulum, we've talked about it a little bit. So basically, when I got hired, there was like 3 administrators, 2 of the directors at the time, the director of secondary and elementary. I believe there was 1 DFT, either a union member, and there was like, I think an ADSA and 1 other. There was like 4 or 5 people when I got hired as an assistant principal, and then I just got called by Carl Stoof at the time, who was the interim, right when Jeremy Hughes left, and I was given the position as assistant. When I was hired as a principal under John Artis's, Dr. Artis's time, basically there was 1 committee. There was a few more people. Again, there was 1 staff member or 1 DFT member, and then the rest were administrators, either principals or cabinet members, and Dr. Artis would then get the finalists. Now, because I was the first interview myself and I believe it was Miss Roush at the time, we were the first 2 to get hired under his as principal. He actually sat in on it, but normally after that, he would then have a final interview. So he kind of did the final interview with me, but it was definitely not multiple committees. It was one committee and then the superintendent. That's how it used to be. Now, in 2010, Matt Wandry was the HR director. So it started there, I believe. It may have been 10, and then the committee started around that time, I believe, and it was under when Brian Whiston was superintendent. And Mary, you might recall, but then it started moving more towards there was a want to have more stakeholder input through community committees. So that evolved a little. When I was in HR, I then created kind of a system for tallying it and allowing. People used to just have to say out loud who they were recommending.
That's
and then
what I
we
was gonna
changed that.
say.
We
That's what I
changed that.
remember.
We changed that when I was, and we did that working. We said, no, you're just going to fill out the sheet, and then you can just submit it, and then I would tally the results, then give it at the time to Brian Whiston. So we've basically stuck with that system that we started, and then maybe we refined it a few times since 2015, since I was superintendent.
Yeah, we've
But it kind of
tweaked,
moved more to that, and I would, like the disclaimer and other things that we've done. So that is kind of the history of what would happen with administrative hires.
So can you think of any complaints pre-2010 about the process?
I don't recall any complaints, but at the time, but
Well, I think go for it.
As being on the board when this evolved, there were complaints, and the complaints came from people who thought there wasn't enough stakeholder input, and that's why it kind of grew. We were hearing as individual board members, people who were the perception in the hiring process was that there wasn't enough input from the people in the community who thought that they should have a fingerprint on the selection process. So it slowly, like the students was the end game kind of thing of being brought in. It kept on growing a little bit at a time of who was added from the initial committee. But in the beginning, it was just directors and a couple cabinet
When you
members.
say beginning, when do you? Can you
I started
specify
on the board in 2008.
And when was the process changed?
It evolved. It wasn't like an overnight change. It just slowly
Right. When did
started
this
to shift.
committee's
When
start?
Brian Whiston became superintendent, he started to listen to what the concerns were.
Right. So, do you know? I have a question, but I'll let you finish.
can I answer one thing too? We not only the administrator, but we tightened up and we made modifications to the teacher process, the whole recommendation process. We created additional forms with recommendations, who was on the committee. Because prior, for hiring a teacher, sometimes it would just be the principal would meet in the office, and then they would just send an email to HR, and that was it. That's how I got hired as a teacher as well.
We had
And then-
questions like, are you related to anyone in the district?
Yeah, we have
Like
a
on
lot
the
of.
form.
And
You
that
just
was from me, too.
Do you want to? Oh, yeah, Jim can.
So being around this process for a long time, from the early 2000s, there was also several board members who felt that, to put it bluntly, there was a good old boy network going on here. And so by opening it up to the community, to parents, to staff members, you really got a better cross-section of the entire community as part of the process.
Right.
We also heard from our union heads at that time as well, who felt that the unions were not being included in the process, and this was a way to build that relationships with our unions to bring them in, make them more part of the process as well. So I would have to say that, as Dr. Maleko said, it was a process that evolved, but it was a process where we heard from all of our stakeholders in helping to bring about where we are today, to bring about a more fair process in hiring and interviewing.
I've always supported parents being involved, but what would a parent or a student know what an executive director's qualifications are? Rhetorical question, right? So, but we get parents involved early, and they honestly feel like they're making a decision, and they rate the candidates, and we had to go a couple years ago and put a disclaimer that you're just part of the process. So, and if they don't get, the person that they chose, how qualified are they to choose somebody at the cabinet level or somebody, just below that?
So in the past,
So-
Trustee Barry, they were part of, so like, for example, this Thursday coming up, that's the administrative committee interviewing the 15 candidates that were selected for an interview. So in the past, we would have had all the committees, those candidates would go through all the committees the same day. So that's why and also it's a time commitment, right? So the people that are volunteering are giving us their time, giving the process their time. So instead of them having to interview 15 candidates for the second round, so we do the screening as the educators, and then that's why they're in the second round.
Sure. And I seen one of the examples earlier, that's why I wanna see which districts they
Yeah.
are, where this is a long process for us.
Yeah.
Somebody retires or somebody resigns or gets a job someplace else, and here it is, a couple months later, and we finally get on the agenda. So one of the examples, let's see, where.
I actually have the names on my computer, I'll
Yeah.
send them to you.
We can put it in the.
Example 3, where it's just one committee where it involves all the stakeholders. So if I'm a parent, I have no clue what the director of so-and-so does. I might ask a question and somebody else is in the room might be able to educate me. And it helps me make a better decision compared to just having like a
That's
small
very true,
committee
yeah.
going one process, it's a week later, people committing their time. So I'm the one that asked for us to revisit this for obvious reasons. The number one complaint you get from parents is if they don't get their choice, is, they knew who they're gonna pick from the get-go, and that's not right either, it gives us a reputation. Then sometimes when we get somebody from out of district, there's some phenomenal people that wanna apply from out of district, and we do have that reputation, at least I hear it. I'm not gonna say anything, I hear that reputation that, in Dearborn, they're gonna pick their own. And we have some amazing people in this room that came from out of district, they're doing amazing things for us, so whatever we can do to get away from that. They knew who they were gonna pick, or they're gonna pick somebody within the district, whatever. I guess take that back to your committee
Yeah.
and see, what is it we can do? I'm looking
Absolutely.
forward to the
It could
next
be,
presentation.
I mean, I have an idea right now, but I won't say it, I'll share it with the committee.
Yeah, please,
But based
thank
on what you're saying,
Thank you.
Trustee
I'm
Thorpe
sorry.
was first.
Absolutely, go.
2 items. The first, I think you were just speaking about this because I served on the parent committee years ago, and one of the concerns we'll get from people is when you're asked to serve, you're not given a lot of notice, and it's like you've got to be at a drop of a hat ready to go. Is that still kind of the parameters we have to work in because of the timeline we're dealing with, or is it more flexible now?
No, that is a challenge, because the turnover time is so quick and we're trying to do it in time for a board meeting. So, as much as possible, so for example, the schools that have vacant positions, I actually shared the list of all the parents and for the Dearborn High position, the students, with an HR generalist today. Now, those interviews won't be until next week. So those calls will be made tomorrow to contact all those people to serve on all those committees because it's 6 vacancies. So here's what happens. If you do it too soon, they forget or something else comes up. And if you do it too close to it, obviously it's not enough time for them to be available. So I'm thinking a week would be good. But it doesn't always turn out to be perfectly a week. Sometimes it just depends on, like, we have this vacancy, and we always try to get the administrators in place before the school year begins. But for example, we wouldn't go through that process until this evening because 2 elementary principals were just approved. So we need to know that before, because there's a domino effect. So we waited for the executive director position because that created a vacancy. Then we did principals, because then that creates vacancies. And so now we're cutting it close, but fortunately the board meeting in August isn't till the end of August. So that gives us more time. But in that time, we're gonna have the first round on Thursday, the second round for the different levels, so it's different days next week. And then the final round has to fit into Dr. Malako's calendar and the executive director all before, and then he needs to speak with all of you. So all that needs to happen before the board meeting. But like in this case, I think the timing is great. It's not always perfect the way we would want it to be, though. So I've been trying really hard to make sure that we're giving more advance notice. But I can tell you, we went back to one elementary and we tried to do another parent committee because we only had one parent show up. And we write down everybody that we call and what their responses are, and if we ever get in touch with them. So we keep track of all of that. But even the second time around, we could only get 3 to commit. And then the day before, only 1 was committing. So then we just said, forget it. We're not going to have all the candidates come in for one parent when we already tried. This is our second time trying. But, you know, it's also summer and people are traveling.
The other one that I would have, and feel free to comment on this, but I'd put this out then to the board as well. The idea that the committee could change depending on the position that you are hiring, and my thought is this. As a parent, the hiring of a principal is very important to me. The hire of an executive director might not be as important. And no offense to HR or to business, but there's not really any parent interaction. Special ed's a different situation, and you want to make sure you've got parents on that one. So maybe it does make sense that the committees look a little bit different depending on the position that we're talking about.
And I think for the executive in the cabinet, Mason, isn't it normally 2? Is it 2 committees for the directors?
So it depends on the position we have.
Depending.
So, like, for example, we just did safety and security.
Yeah,
no,
depending
that
on
was
the
a
level.
supervisor,
That's
though.
true.
That's not a director, so doesn't follow this process. But like director of accounting,
Yes. Like,
okay, we couldn't get unions to participate in director of accounting. They were all given the option, but to them they're like, it's accounting, right? HR, director of HR is now vacant. All the unions have been, representatives have been invited. And I kind of was thinking about that. Well, do we include parents on HR? But then, you know, I don't know. It's a little odd, you know, so, but for special ed, we would absolutely have parents on.
there's been times for those positions you described, Trustee Thorpe, that it was like 2 committees. So it was like maybe you had 1 parent representative or 2, you know, like the accounting or the business director, and then you'd have the other committee with administration. So we've done it that way in the past too.
Trustee Mosen?
Yeah, I also was on the other side. I was actually as somebody who was not a parent yet. This was back in 2012. I was invited by the late Brian Weston to participate in appointment of a high school principal. And my number 1 choice, my number 2 choice, my number 3 choice were not even selected. Did I go and complain that my pick wasn't chosen? No, I did actually work closely with that principal until they left that high school. So I know for parents, they do have that perception that, or for anybody who's from outside who's participating, this is the job of the superintendent to choose that person, and to choose that person based on their qualifications, their fit, and his best judgment. So, and the other perception that Dearborn grows its own talent and it's very difficult for other folks to penetrate is true. I think it's because we have a good talent program where somebody can start. We just had somebody who started as a part-time driver and now he is a supervisor. So that is a success story. But at the same time, I want to also focus on perhaps we can learn from the college because they're going through the same process, and perhaps you could communicate with the HR in college, because we had a presentation about implicit bias, about interviewing as an administrator, interviewing a colleague, and you would have to check those. Another thing is to treat candidates kind of blindly without paying attention to the names, but to just focus on those qualifications and what they bring to the table, especially if they're an outsider. It's very difficult for the superintendent to know somebody who's coming from outside. They will have to do external checks, which I believe he does all the
Yes.
time. I hope that next time, and this is recommendation also of the board would like to add this to the process, is that yes, usually in a job right now, when you call for somebody, if I apply for a job, somebody's gonna call my former manager. Would also love to call your subordinate, somebody who actually reported to you, and ask them, how was that, boss? Especially for a managerial position where somebody's gonna be managing people. You would like to know their subordinate's opinion of them as well. I think that speaks even more volume. That will give you more input of saying, this is a great person I want to hire, or perhaps not. So I hope that those thoughts are taken into consideration as you're researching. And again, this should be the decision of the superintendent. It's his responsibility as he sees fit to his best judgment.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Thank you.
I will share all the feedback and suggestions and things to think about with the committee, and we'll see you in August.
And you did welcome any other thoughts that come along as we're kind
Oh,
of in this.
absolutely. Anything that pops up, you can let me know, I'll share.
Okay.
And
Thank
Ms.
you.
Farage is co-chairing the committee with her.
Yes.
And the one thing I do have to just mention through all this is that all of the committees, it's all a regardless of what process you go with, no one has to serve on the committee. I mean, obviously, if you're the supervisor, I guess you have to, but, basically it is depending on how, so we would continue with that. I think that's the
Yeah.
right way to go.
And one more tidbit is that when people reach out to me and say, hey, I want to be on this committee, I direct them to their union president. So I do not get involved in, HR does not get involved in who represents the unions. And people have been upset with me at times, and I explain like, no, this is for the integrity of the process. You have to go through the union. They give me the names. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, real quick, I just want you to definitely take Dr. Maleko's thoughts and his into mind, because he is ultimately responsible for the decision that's made, whether it be good or bad or however it turns out. So a process that works for him, that's timely, I think all those things are most important.
Absolutely. Will do.
Next item, please.
Henry Ford Early College Building, Mr. Thomas Wall.
Every agenda item.
I thought we were gonna go take a tour.
Might as well,
All
we're
right.
here.
Just to kind of give you an update on the process. The district has drafted the sale document and is sitting in the college's hand for review right now. So at this point, we don't officially, the K-12 doesn't officially own the building yet. So we have not actually, we've been obviously been able to access it, through the college. We have also done our asbestos review. So we were ready to go with that once it started, but obviously no contracts have been let in on this process because we don't own the buildings yet. The other thing we have is engaged the architect. So the architect has met with administration and operations to do what they call a bubble diagram. That's just basically just talking about the concept. And as you can see up here, just boxes. So there's no design of the boxes. And once the board kind of makes sure they're comfortable with it, that we set a budget for it, then we start the discussions with staff. What's going to be in the classroom? How's it going to flow? So just so the staff know that that's the next step to kind of get into the more detailed discussion. So this is what we call a bubble diagram. So this is, there's a 3-level complex. This is just the south building that we're focusing on right now, because that's the one that takes the most need for us to be able to get this moving and established, so eventually our students can move out of the actual HFC building into our own building. So there's 3 levels. This is the lower level. It's like a tri-level. So this is actually half below grade, half above. And as you can see, when you walk into this, you actually walk into a stairwell that goes up or down. So there is really no true, forum or open area to actually, you normally would see in a school, you walk into a more, the offices, common space. That doesn't exist in this design.
Hey, Tom,
So this one, and yes.
Can you kind of tell us where the front is on this picture?
So you see the RR that's on the right-hand side?
Yeah.
Right above, right next to that is where the walk-in, and you would either go down to this level or go up to the next level.
Thank you.
Oh, I
The
see.
parking
Oh,
lot
thank you.
is at the top.
It's at the mid-level of this classroom,
Yeah.
or this level, yes. And so talking that, we're trying to get a certain number of classrooms in the building. Even though we do have the other building, you know, that you'd have to have administration in the other building, so we're trying to focus into just this building, as many classrooms as we can get. Alright. Just scroll down, okay. Alright, so we go to the second level. So what we're talking about is having more classrooms, so we get up to the number of classrooms we would desire for our current program and slight expansion. We are also recommending to have an addition built on the front of it that more service the common area that public would walk into, the students would walk into. It would have the administrative counseling area, would have a cafe/commons, and obviously a kitchen area. So this would be the new entrance off the ground level from the parking lot into the building. And then we would have the grades up or down depending on how you want to get to the other buildings. Again, this is only what we call bubble diagram, so it's not very detail intensive at this point, but it's basically looking at what space you need so you can at least establish a budget to what to work within. So as one of the things we talked about here is you're going to have college kids potentially working with K-12 kids. So that's why a common area that's outside of the classroom area for safety and security, where they can meet in like small vestibules or like you say, the library, rooms like that sense, so they can actually still work on projects that we're actually working with college kids when they're taking classes. And then the upper level would have some additional classrooms with the expansion of potentially additional classrooms that would be over the addition. And we'll also have 2 science labs that would also be on the second level. So this is what we call a bubble diagram. So once they got this done, working with administration and operations, then they come to putting a dollar value based on the type of classrooms, the science labs, the administrative, and that's where the budget comes in at roughly just under 17 million. So we don't really have a formalized process here of establishing budgets. We have, when we went through a bond program, we go through that budgetary process, submit it to the state for validation. So right now we're just on the conceptual stage. So before we go too far down the design, I want to make sure the board was comfortable with the, roughly estimated to $17 million for this project. When we originally talked about this back in 2018, we said set aside $10 million for the renovation. So right now in our ESSER and building and site fund of that $80 million, we do have $10 million already set aside. So what we're looking for is that additional $7 million to make sure the board's comfortable with that. Do we need an actual vote on it? No. But more of a consensus that if there's some concerns, at least bring it up to us and we can address it and then set the architect to start moving forward, because the design will take, quite a bit, months to actually design it as you go through the investigatory and design and developing the specifications. I do have experts right there.
Oh,
They moved
sorry.
up, just in case
Trustee
there's
Petchikoff.
questions.
A question that just occurred to me, because this is partially a college
Mhm.
program, and with the new budgets moving forward, I know it's under the P-12 finances, but I believe I read something recently with all the newfound wealth in Lansing and what they're distributing for educational purposes, and community colleges have always been shortchanged because we can't access any of the funding that four-year college can for building and site issues, even though we still, because our students are commuters. But we complained about this when I was on the board, and we had to redo the parking lot, which is basically our housing for our students, but they wouldn't give us any kind of funding for it at all, and we had to carry the full burden. When we're looking at something like this, which is a combined program, which also includes community college, a component to it, Is there any way we could access any of those kinds of fundings that go to, I didn't think so,
Yeah,
but.
no, the state kind of treats us as two separate entities,
Right.
even legally we're one entity. They do treat us as
The-
two separate ones
Right,
for
when it
funding
comes
by any
to
state
funding,
grant.
right, so we can't access any extra,
Now, we do have roughly about 16 million left in ESSER funds that we're working with administrative to kind of design what that means. So part of that money will come from that aspect, because out of this process, there's obviously the air quality of that aspect, so the boiler replacement, if we're doing windows, HVAC equipment, so all that will be part of it, so we don't really figure that all out. But again, we're just talking about the generic budget at this point.
and we still haven't found out what DEQ would, be doing, cause I know what we were required to do when we took over parking and green space, when we,
Correct.
that we had, and it cost us millions of dollars
Yeah, with
To
a close
offset it
proximity to the river.
to the river.
Yes.
Because of the runoff. And we still don't have an answer on whether any of the addition would, put us into, a bind financially with having to replace.
Right, we haven't gone that
Yeah,
far.
we haven't
Right
gone
now,
that
we're just
far,
at the
so
bubble
when you
type.
say 17 million,
They're
that-
aware of
that-
it, but they
yeah.
haven't gone down that.
Yeah,
yet.
so that it could be a different dollar figure with this addition on the front.
Trustee Watts, did you have your hand up?
Yes, but Mr. Wall already answered it.
Okay, Trustee Thorpe?
Going along the lines of the addition, how necessary is it, and what is the portion of that cost that you would attribute to this?
The number of classrooms was the guiding factor. When they looked at the number of classrooms for the existing program, they were trying to target 17. But as we know, I think they're 14 is what they currently use, I believe. 14, and they were wanting additional because we're looking at that cyber college move up. But I know we don't want that to be the end of it. So that's why we're looking at those additional classrooms above the new addition to give them a total of 20 classrooms to basically have for that program and have some room to expand.
And what would you guess of the 17 million you're saying would go towards that new construction?
I'm going to bring up the experts on that part.
Yeah, I think so. Let me just put that up.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. So towards the new addition, we're looking, the cost is about $8.45 million.
So about half the cost, we're assuming. All right.
Any other questions? Trustee Petchakov?
If we didn't go forward with the Cafe Commons area, kitchen serving and all, that, which is all brand new building, rather than just remodeling the existing building, would we have space to at least have a kitchen area? I mean, we do serve, I don't know, what are we doing with the, students right now
They've
for
got-
meals?
Right
For
now,
lunches.
they're being served in the same building
Yeah.
at the cafeteria in that building.
Oh, there is a cafeteria down?
Yes.
I thought they moved to another building,
Are
Trustee
they
Barry.
going
Do
to
you
another
remember from when we did that tour?
Is,
They go to 5101.
5101.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't think
Travel
they
there.
were eating within, in the basement there. Is there any other opportunity, or would it just be taking way too much? Cause as I recall, there is a small kitchen up there already.
correct.
Cause I've been in
Right.
that end of the building.
But it wouldn't be large enough, so we would actually start moving into that second building for any additional classrooms. But again, then, as you know, that building is separate from the other one.
Right.
So you'd have to have oversight in that building, obviously, also for those kids that are over there.
Well, I'm just trying, like I said, because I was here and I know what DEQ did to us about that, and I'm just trying to find a way to avoid having to get, and it took also a lot of time to get all the approvals for everything too. If we're going to expand out like that onto the, because I know that's parking right now, they're basically
Correct.
where the,
Correct, that's that little.
yeah, that's that little,
area. Yeah,
little,
correct.
so, you know, I'm just thinking, if there's a way to do it without adding that part on.
And we did briefly look at that, and architects still looking at that whole layout. What happened is there's several
Do
factors.
you want to speak to the mic, please?
There are several factors that influenced the decision to perhaps expand, and the reason being was One is the approach to drop-off logistics. The other one, the actual commons area and kitchen were not big enough to serve the space. So looking at that expansion would actually help the approach, the entrance. There's not really a good anchor point for the entrance or for the bus turnaround. So that's all came into play, and we looked at it collectively with an architect, and decided that this would probably be the best approach for the school to do something about it.
Are
But
we busing them in? I thought they had to get here on their own.
There's some I
some
think part of the,
transportation.
Yeah, each high school provides a bus.
Does provide a bus?
A shuttle
Okay.
like that, yeah.
They have to go to the high school first, and then they take
Yeah.
another bus.
Is that for the early college students or the
Yeah,
collegiate academy?
For the early
Really?
car, I thought they were here,
Okay.
yeah.
I've seen the bus thing.
Yeah, we currently have one bus that shuttles between each high school.
In the Berry Center as well.
Correct. Correct.
I have a question regarding what Trustee Pelishkov saying about the risk of water mitigation. Has that been looked into? Is that something that is in the horizon?
yeah, so we are looking into having a survey company do an investigation of the whole site, giving us the full understanding of what needs to be done to the site before we move forward with the additional design, but that's in the process currently.
And are we getting DEQ involved? Now they have a different name.
Yeah, I-
Eagle? Eagle, are we getting Eagle involved early in the process?
So the Eagle is involved as well.
They will
It's
be,
part of
once
the-
we get more of a concept of our design, yes, they will be.
So we can mitigate that risk early before we get into the
Correct.
weeds.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Board of Education Business, Acknowledgements of Correspondence.
Okay, we have had a few correspondence, a lot of them had to do with things that are going on in the district, but, anyone have any that you can think of? I've been answering a few emails, but less recently.
It's been quiet.
Yeah, it's been a little
Well,
quiet.
everyone is on vacation.
I was gonna say everybody's on
Oh,
vacation.
don't jinx it.
Not everyone.
Next item, please.
Board Member Committee and Organization Reports.
Well, we already had the evaluation wrap up basically. And I appreciate everybody's participation. I especially appreciate MASB and Jay Bennett for facilitating for us.
And thank you for jumping into that chair position, Trustee Betchikoff. We appreciate that.
City relations.
City relations, yes.
Yes, we met on June 28th, almost a month ago. Both teams, the city and Dearborn Public Schools, had many members there. Some of the items, I'm not going to get into details, I'll just go over some of the items that we discussed, and my colleagues, Trustee Betchikoff, Trustee Watts can chime in too. We discussed engineer certification. We're asking the city to look into it if this is something that can be waived for the schools. We also talked about maybe having a discussion, since we have a new administration, if there's any potential land acquisition, what that would look like. And we gave them a couple of examples that we discussed. Director Mustin helped in that department. Also, we revisited facility usage, sports facility uses, recreation programs. That's going a little slower than I thought it would, but we're going to wait a little bit because it is a new administration. We want to get them on board before we start some real discussions there. Most important was school safety. The police chief, Issa Shaheen, was there. Did a great job presenting some of the messaging he's been putting out. We also volunteered to, also help him with the safety messages. I know something that's important for us that we're not making any final decisions yet, but driver's education, we continue to have that discussion. Something that's, just we're always talking about is the traffic issues around schools. I know there's a pilot program. If you want to elaborate a little bit on that, Dr. Maleko. I know you already chose some of the schools.
Yeah, we sent a list, so they have some grant funding for approximately 5 schools to look for. They have to be on city streets though, not county roads. And so we sent the list from across the district we gave them some options too. We basically sent 7, and then they could kind of choose between. And it could be, for speed bumps or signage or things that would help with traffic flow in and
Yeah,
around.
paint striping,
Yeah,
all kinds
yes.
of, they're gonna experiment at each school with something different to see if they can help do traffic calming in front of the schools and see what works the best.
So to the rest of our colleagues, you did get the minutes of the meeting, so if there's anything you wanted added for next agenda, please reach out to one of us, let us know.
When is your next meeting?
We haven't set that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so usually,
It's a big coordination between 2 different bureaucracies.
Probably fall, I'm assuming.
it's not that, Joanne can handle everything. So.
Yes, we know
I was
that.
trying to give her a.
No, she can, so, yeah, thank you. Anything else, trustee Watt, trustee Petrichor, you want to add it? Thank you, I'm all set, thank you.
Any other committees? I'm just going to put it out there, it wasn't a committee meeting, but we have had board training. We had a session last week, and we'll have another session Thursday this week. And it was facilitated by Debbie Stair from MASB. I think it was beneficial. I've gotten some good things out of it, and looking forward to our next session, which will again be this Thursday. Thank you everyone for your time and committing to doing this with us. I think it's going to be useful and help us be a better board. Next item, please.
Board member / superintendent commentary.
Commentary too, but trustee Petrichor.
Oh, trustee Petrichor.
I just wanted to alert the community to a couple of events that are coming up that are fundraisers that will help support a lot of charitable programs, including Forts and Varsity Alumni Club, which has supported everything athletically programmed over at Fortson High School, plus endowed scholarship for any of their students who attend here at Henry Ford College. And one is they're going to be having a chicken dinner this coming weekend, correct? This Saturday.
This coming Saturday,
Which
starting
is-
at 4:30 to 7:30 at the old Kroger's on the north side of,
Michigan and
Michigan
Outer
Ave.
Drive. And that it not only benefits Forts and Varsity Alumni Club, but other organizations, Exchange Club,
Dearborn Burn
Dearborn
Drive,
Burn Drive, the
Goodfellows,
Goodfellows.
yeah.
and the animal shelter.
And then following that, Homecoming is back. But Homecoming will be in a new location. Homecoming will be over at basically what I call the Civic Center, the Dearborn Performing Arts and Community Center on Michigan and Greenfield. And they also, we will be there, the DFT and the public schools will be represented there as usual, but in a new location. And many other charitable organizations, because it originated to be a fundraiser for a variety of programs. So if you are a beer drinker and you get any alcoholic beverages there, you will be supporting, once again, the Forts of Varsity Alumni Club, plus a number of other organizations as well. And there, of course, is the Carnival Rides. We will be providing shuttle buses from the school district as well. So our bus drivers will be ready for the upcoming school year, and they are going to be at a variety of locations this year. It used to be just Dearborn High, and they're now only not Dearborn High, but they will be at Salina, and I can't remember, there's like 5 different locations this year as opposed to just one, so that you don't have to try to find parking, which will be limited around the Performing Arts Center. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we have a couple of things coming up shortly.
And I trust the DFT is going to be passing out lots and lots of books.
We have over 1,000.
All right.
And
So
partnership with Dearborn Public Schools, so we're splitting the cost.
wonderful.
Using the books.
You got little kids there, take them to get a book. Oh, I just had one question, Pat, about the fundraiser, since you had the most information. That is just a grab and go, correct?
Yeah, it's just a drive through, you pick up your food and you drive back out.
Okay, and you pay
And-
for your
Or
food.
whatever.
The donation is $15, but if you don't have $15, we'll still give you a half a chicken.
Okay, anyone else? Trustee Barry?
And if you have more to donate, it goes to a good cause.
You're correct.
Dr. Malika, thank you for the visit at the DIA. I know 3 out of the 4 students saw your video, and how powerful is that the superintendent actually went and visited the art. Just for the public, this will go on for another week. I think there's 40 pieces of art there at the DIA, and 4 of them is from students in Dearborn. How amazing is that? And just for the record, make it a lunch. There's a cafe in the courtyard. We're supposed to get down there sooner or later, but
Yes, we are.
hopefully sometime this week. So just wanted to mention that. Great things happening.
And if you're a Wayne County resident, it's free to get into the DIA.
Yeah, it's free. It was
Yeah.
free. The exhibition is free.
Because our
Yeah.
tax dollars are already paying for it.
Madam
Trustee
President,
Mosen?
thank you. I would like to also make an announcement about Dearborn Homecoming, which is upcoming August 5th to 7th, and this time they have a change of destination. I know a lot of folks have different opinions about that, but let's give it a try. It's at the Civic Center, Fort Performing Arts Center. So I'm looking forward to attend the homecoming, and we'll see how the fireworks will go this time at the Civic Center. So that's going to be interesting too. It's this week, I believe, is the end of the summer program that we have in our district. So I know Omar had a lot of great things to say about the summer program, especially the field trips and the camp invention program. I believe that was well invested for those who enrolled at this program. I think it was a very good retention program, especially for students who needed to continue learning along the summer. I'd like to give kudos to 2 of our teammates. They're there in the back, Eric and Josh. I know it's a different time, David as well. Different environment for them, but they were up for the job. So thank you for televising and always being there for us.
Anyone else? Trustee Watts?
I just wanted to say that July is Disability Pride Month. And I know many of our students may be finishing up school, but I think the month of July gives us an opportunity to recognize that our students are all unique, and that I look forward to when school starts full-time in August. I'm just hoping everyone has a great remaining summer. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next item, please.
Request for information and or future agenda items.
Trustee Thorpe?
Dr. Maleko, I think I've talked to you about this one privately, but I'd like to get information on what our district is doing regarding sports and promoting sports to our students. We got an email, I think it was at the beginning of the summer, about the disbanding of the hockey team. And a couple of years ago, we had the gymnastics program fold. And I know that there's other programs throughout the district that numbers might be dwindling. So I'm wondering, do we ever partner with other organizations in the community, or how do we keep the pipelines full of students who are participating in these things? I'd only ask for information unless it's something that other board members would actually like to see as a formal presentation.
I think that's good.
Information or formal presentation?
If it's only me that's interested, I'm fine with information, but if there's interest through the board.
That's what I'm asking, is the board
I'm
interested in
interested
a
as
formal
well.
presentation?
I think it would be a good discussion.
Okay,
Yeah. I would welcome that.
of course you would, Mr. Football.
Well, no, I mean,
I know, I'm just
I
teasing.
know the hockey program was not fair to one of our high schools, and now to see it, I know it's not going away. We're partnering up with other district, but it's
But
a
you do-
heartbreaker.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
heartbreaker to lose these programs. What, a few years ago, what was it?
The gymnastics
The
was-
gymnastics. We want to encourage do more, not less.
Absolutely.
I know we started this year also, if you can that be in the report as far as how's the soccer program for the middle school. It was the first their inaugural year. So we'd like to know the participation in there. And yeah, we'd like to know how can we promote sports to our students, especially those who usually don't take a sport that is like very popular, like football or soccer or cross country. So very good to ask.
Anyone else? No? Next item, please.
Future meeting dates, Thursday, July 28th, 2022, P-12 Board Retreat, 6 p.m. at the Administrative Service Center in Room 12. Monday, August 8th, 2022, HFC Board of Trustees meeting, 7 p.m. at the Administrative Services and Conference Center in the Rosenau Boardroom. And Monday, August 22nd, 2022, P-12 Board of Education meeting, 7 p.m. at the Administrative Service Center in the Frank Banchi Boardroom.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I was good.